conceptualizing what we are now calling the mentoring circles. And these are interactive group mentoring workshops. So you may or may not be aware of our mentoring program, which seeks to assign a mentor to each of the entrepreneurs in the business readiness phase program of our incubation, where mentors and mentees would have a one-on-one relationship. But we thought we have a great pool of mentors in our program, great expertise. And why should we restrict those expertise to just one individual? Why should it be that one individual at a time is able to attain value from our mentors' expertise? And we thought to formulate these group mentoring workshops, which were inspired again by the incredible experience of our mentors and the insights of our mentors. And this is our second installment of the mentorship circles. And in this particular session, we'll be addressing the pricing strategy, broadly speaking. And we would like to zone in on using pricing as a marketing method. This topic was suggested by the previous cohort, or the cohort who attended the first inaugural mentorship workshop. After the workshop, we requested that they suggest some topics they'd like to cover in the next sessions. And pricing, costing, as well as marketing was a prominent suggestion from the feedback we attained. And we thought to tackle this particular topic because it sort of looks to aggregate the two prominent themes that came out of the first session. So we'll be looking at the various pricing strategies and how to match your pricing to your identified target market. So the agenda we have proposed, perhaps before we get to the agenda, I see Emilia has a hand up. Emilia? Emilia, if you are saying anything, your microphone is on mute.
Sorry, guys, it's fine. I wasn't able to hear you very clearly. It's not very loud, but it's okay. I can hear now.
Okay, I will try to project further. Yeah, more. Thank you for that, Emilia. And I actually, we restructured. Sorry, I made a bit of a mistake there. We restructured the running order, and Nishi will be going first. But I'll be getting into the program just now. Thank you for pointing that out, Nishi. So between now and 10 past 9, we'll be doing our welcoming and introductions, which is what we currently are doing. And then from 10 past 9. We will start with our panel discussion. Once again, we'll be focusing on the topic pricing strategy, using pricing as a marketing method. Our panelist discussion will go on until 25 past 10 or so. Sorry, to 10 o'clock. And then from 10 o'clock to 25 past 10, we'll have a Q&A. And then in the last 5 minutes of the session, we will discuss action items that will emerge out of the session, and we'll have our closing. So on our panel this morning, we have Nishi Singh, who is a certified director, a board member, a managing director, and a professional mentor. And Nishi will be giving us the first address, in which she will be giving us insights into pricing as a strategy. And this will be generalized across all business sectors and all business sizes. After Nishi has given her address, we'll hand things over to Katekani Hlaise, who holds an Oxford MBA. She is a strategist, she has expertise in venture consulting, and she is a mentor in the Black Umbrellas program, as is Nishi. And she's a mentor in a personal capacity as well. And Kate Kati will be talking to us about how and when to adjust your pricing model aligned with trends and market demands, and what factors to consider when making those adjustments. And then closing the panel discussion, all for us, will be Dr. Thommie Burger, who has expertise in financial modeling and is a business valuation analyst. He holds a PhD in entrepreneurship and business management. as well as an MBA in International Business Management. And Dr. Thommie Burger will be tackling the topic this morning, the necessity for pricing strategy, and he'll give us a list of the various pricing strategies, looking at 5 of the most common pricing models and strategies. He'll also go into or dig a little deeper into the reasons one might use each of these pricing strategies and models. He'll also give us insights into the pros and cons of each of these strategies and models, and will share with us examples for each. So each of the panelists will talk to the forum on their topic for 12 to 15 minutes, and this will be followed by a question and answer session at the end or after rather the panel discussion. We ask that the audience please note any questions they have during the panelists discussion, and we will raise the questions during the Q&A session, which will follow the discussion. Just to note, colleagues, the panelists were initially given the same topic to address. And again, it's broadly speaking pricing strategy, so there may be some duplication, but each of them will be speaking to the highlighted topics. And so, and I mean, they will be looking at things from a different lens. But should there be any duplication, I think this should be taken to stress the significance of the concepts that are duplicated and the importance thereof. And it shouldn't deter us from the crux of the presentations. And on that note, I will hand over to Kati to take us through her presentation. Kati,
I think it's Nishi.
Oh, sorry, I keep confusing this. Yes.
Thanks, Kati.
Sorry, it's Nishi who will give us the first address. Over to you, Nishi.
Thank you very much, Siviwe. I'm going to get right into it because time is of the essence, and I want to maximize the time that I do have been afforded. So I'm just going to share the screen now. Siviwe, I'll take my lead from you. You can tell me when it's appearing and available to everyone.
Sure, yes, it is displaying, Nishi.
Okay, great. Well, good morning to everyone, and thank you for giving up your time this morning to come and just be enlightened in what hopefully will lead you forward in the pricing aspect of running your businesses. Not every aspect that I'll be sharing this morning, which is from a generalist perspective, so across businesses, across industries. I'm just going to be sharing insights from both sides of the table, which I thought would be quite helpful for you as SMMEs largely in the audience this morning, where I'm going to be sharing perspectives both from the small business side, which in most instances you would be the supplier, and then also in my engagement and working with large businesses, which in all probability would be the clients that you are targeting and are servicing. So that perspective should help to hone in and fine-tune your approach, your offering, and ultimately your pricing. I'm not sure why my presentation is jumping around, but back to that. Okay, so I'm going to delve right into it. Okay, and Siviwe did say we should just introduce ourselves and a little bit about what we do. So that's what I'm going to start first. And the reason why I think this is important is because it will help give perspective on the presentation that each of us will do, what perspective we're coming from, and what kind of experience and knowledge we bring to the table. So predominantly, I'm MD of NSP Consultants. It's a business/management advisory agency. I also apply a business rescue approach, and I'm a strategist for growth and sustainability. I'm also a director at a national company, Isidingo Security Services, and there I cover the portfolio of generalist, which is all-encompassing across departments. I'm an expert advisor on Insights by Experts, which covers industries serving the continent of Africa, board member, professional mentor, as well as a BEE practitioner. Okay, let's delve right into it then. I want to start out by making a statement. If you had to ask me, what is it that I sell? I think the best way to answer that would be that I sell peace of mind. And you will find, if you look at your experience both as a consumer as well as a supplier, that people will pay to be able to pass on the burden or problem that they know once they pass it over to you, they can take it as done. That means you need to be dependable, reliable, and consistent. Those of you that I work with, and there's so many of you in the audience this morning, and welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. You'd know that I always like starting with the basics or starting with the obvious, because sometimes we tend to overlook that. The first obvious or basic point that I want to throw out there this morning is that turnover is not profit. There are companies that could have very, very attractive and impressive turnovers. But if you look at their profitability and if you break down the numbers, in some instances, the profits are so low or non-existent that a company should never be measured on turnover alone. And this is a discussion I have very often with funding houses, with banks and various entities. Prices are probably the most critical determining factor when making a purchasing decision. We should never overlook its importance, and being in business makes it no different. Sometimes we think that the price of an item is important from a personal perspective only when you do your personal buying, but I think it is equally and more so important in business as well. Remember that business exists ultimately to make a profit. And you should always be looking at your profit margins and ensuring that in the course of your business, whether at startup, in your growth phase, that you are making a profit. A successful business solves a problem or fills a need. Otherwise, it won't be sustainable. In other words, there must be a need out there for what it is you are providing or supplying. It's not about how great your product or your service is. The fact that you're in your business and you are providing that product or service already means that you believe in it and you know that you are able to provide something of value. But ultimately, from a business perspective, it needs to be about what is the problem or the need that your product or your service will satisfy. Most marketing campaigns today are about selling the amazingness of what you're selling. I believe that that's missing the mark unless you're the only one selling that particular product or service. You have to sell value, and then the customer will buy the product which provides that value. Your industry and your product type obviously must be correctly aligned, and I'm going to leave those finer aspects for my two colleagues who will present after me. The principle, though, remains fixed across industry. What is the value in what you're selling? Even if you're in a regulated pricing industry, I believe that same principle will still hold true. The customer will choose your product based on what value you're offering. We are living in an age of choice today. There's always way too many options for anything and everything. You should always work from the perspective of why should that prospective or target client or customer choose my product, my service, my business? So ultimately, what I'm suggesting this morning is that we should work it back to front. Build in the value, then set the price that a customer will pay and should pay. This will take planning, effort, and commitment. Your deliverables must be very clear. Your presentation is key. Responsiveness and quality do matter, and reputation is always the best reseller. Price is an emotional and a sensitive decision. And as I said earlier and reiterate now, this extends to business as well. What's the trade-off? These are the kind of questions in the minds of your prospective buyers. What's the trade-off for what I'm paying? What experience is this business offering me? What does their post-sales look like? Am I appreciated for my support and my patronage? Remember, cheap isn't always attractive. Not every prospective customer or client is looking for the cheapest price. On the flip side of that as well is that overpriced doesn't impress. So really, it's a fine balancing line, and that boils down to value. Coming from the perspective or the side of the table now where I deal with small businesses, I know I'm generalizing and this may not be applicable to you. Sivi, where have I lost my screen share?
Yes, you have, Nishi. We can no longer see your presentation.
I'm not sure what happened there because I didn't change anything on my side. I'm just going to try and...
And then share again.
Yeah.
Seems to be coming up. Yeah, it's back up, Nishi, and it's back on slide 1.
Apologies about that. I'm not sure what happened. Hopefully everyone can treat this as a recap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we are just about caught up.
Okay, yes. So as I was saying, that this is a general overview and may not necessarily apply to you, so please take it as it's relevant to you. What do I mean by a small business mindset? We shouldn't expect to be paid early. We should look at what it is that we are offering, how we are offering it, and a whole lot of dynamics that go with that. What are your deliverability levels? Can you be trusted to deliver on time and according to what's agreed upon? Do you expect to be excused for hiccups or deliverability because you're a small business? A good asset test, I always say, would be this. Ask yourself this question. Would you support you if you were the client? Don't be untidy in your administration and think it's acceptable for small business. For example, again, basics. Do you provide a proper invoice? Is there a follow-on statement? Do you respond timelessly to complaints and queries post-sales? Don't base pricing on when you provided the service as an employee of a large company. And I see this come across my table quite often in dealing with startups or small businesses in the first 3 years of trading. Yes, you do have the skill and the ability to provide the service and deliver the product, but what recourse or insurance do you offer if it goes wrong? Do you have that built-up reputation or track record that's been tried and trusted in the industry, in business? You need to build yourself up to that level, which is very possible. And it doesn't have to take you as long as it's taken other competitors in your industry. But I think it's very important to locate where you are and work your way up from there. At the end of the day, customers pay for credibility, track record, trust, and recourse. Allow for some level of traction in your pricing. It shouldn't be so rigid that you'd go bust if you're not paid exactly on the last day of the month. Large clients test for capacity and capability, and this is giving you insight from the side of the large business out there. They are looking for assurance that placing larger orders with you won't cause crisis in their supply chain. How do you achieve this elasticity? Manage your costs better. Cut costs, but not corners. And I think we all know exactly what that statement means. If you have a third-party supplier, negotiate better payment terms with them. And there's a host of many other dynamics and factors that you can build in to allow for enough elasticity and flexibility in your pricing. Be creative and innovative, but always realistic. It doesn't help to be so flexible, but then you snap financially. So also know what your threshold is, what your choking point when being negotiable. It's not, again, I go back to the statement about turnover isn't profit. It's no use getting the contract, but you're running it at a loss. Build relationships so that you can be honest and transparent when challenges arise. Usually when things go wrong, that is not the time to go silent on your client. And my time is nearly up, and that glitch, which we'll blame on Severe, I'm just kidding. I always believe that when you ask people for their time, which is the most important resource that anyone can give you, it's always good to give something back. So for the workshop giveaway today, I'm going to be sharing via Black Umbrella, Severe will distribute it, is a health check or an audit worksheet. It's a management tool to assess your current status wherever you're at in your business currently. It can be used each time goals are reviewed and set. It helps you to easily track your progress and useful for when you're doing a SWOT analysis, which should be done periodically and on a regular basis. And I use it as a basis for initial engagements with businesses as well. Thank you for your time, and I hand it back now to Severe.
Thank you so much for that, Nishi. And the management audit tool that you shared with us, which I'll be circulating after this, is I found a great tool and guidance checklist. For governance frameworks, as you've already articulated, it has utility across a broad spectrum of functions in a business. And with your permission, I'd like to share it with our business coaching unit as well. I think it would help improve the conversations. It's a great baseline, especially when an entrepreneur comes into the program, to go over that and see where the entrepreneur stands. And then that can be revisited periodically to see what progress is being made with interventions that we put in place as Black Umbrella. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for your address. I think my biggest takeaway there, I mean, there was a lot, but one of the themes that certainly stand out for me is building oneself up. There's a great saying I picked up somewhere one day, which says, if you want to be a member of the 1%, you must be willing to do what 99% of the population aren't willing to do. And I think that's a great philosophy to stand by, to adopt, and it can apply to various areas of your life, and more so in business. Are you willing to do what 99% of your competitors aren't willing to do? Are you willing to build yourself up to that level? Which will obviously spill over onto your pricing, among other things. So thank you very much for that, Nishi. Nishi will be on the call, and she will be answering any questions you may have from her presentation during the Q&A session. Any closing remarks for the segment, Nishi?
No, thank you for that positive feedback, Severe. Much appreciated, and most certainly, please feel free to distribute that management tool. You've picked up on what I personally would also emphasize and focus on. Have your big goals, have your big dreams, have a vision of where you want to take your business to, but do so with your feet firmly planted on the ground. You've got to earn people's trust. You've got to earn trust in business. And that comes down to how much are you putting in? Because at the end of the day, what you put in is what you'll get out. So you summarized that quite well, and I look forward to engaging further at the Q&A. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nishi. Colleagues, we will move things along and hand over to Kati, who will give us her address. Kati, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Siviwe, and thank you to everyone for joining this morning. As Siviwe has introduced, my name is Katekani Hlaise. I work in the banking sector as a strategist, and outside of that, I'm a venture consultant. So my role in banking and what I do in the venture or startup capacity, I would say are the things that keep me very energized and excited about the opportunities in our country. So I'm going to kick this off, but I'm going to switch off my camera just for bandwidth. But I just wanted you guys to put the name to the face. Siviwe, third slide, please. Leveraging technology. Thank you very much. So, I mean, the topic that I'm going to cover will mostly focus on the factors to consider when adjusting prices and just some of the trends to think about. But I really felt that, you know, it would be an injustice to talk about any sort of strategy and we don't bring up the importance of using or leveraging technology and data in whatever we do. So I just wanted to touch on this lightly, and then I'll kick things off. And again, I think the idea of you know data and technology over the past couple of years, that reliance by whether small business or big business has grown. I think importantly what we've seen during the pandemic is that this has been accelerated by quite a lot. And obviously, I would say technology and data are an enabler. They would support you in informing your decision making. So it wouldn't necessarily be that you employ technology or you use data in your business for the sake of it. It really has to serve a purpose because technology has a cost, data has a cost. So if you are willing to absorb this cost, it needs somehow to be able to feed into what you are doing broadly. So if you, for example, engage your clients via email, via web, if you've got a website, via app, if you have an app, or via social media, or even physically writing things down, you already have data or information that you can use to inform client behavior, purchasing behavior, to inform how your clients interact with your brand online. For example, in this age of social media, one of your clients could easily post your product and say, thank you for servicing me, or thank you for great service. That one client is probably connected to 3,000 other people on their social media network, right? And this is not influencing. This is just the reality of the fact that we live in a very networked world, right? I know 10 other people that could be interested, or your client knows 100 other people. So I think it's you know, as we're thinking marketing strategy, social media is not going away anytime soon. Data and the importance of it and technology are definitely not going away anytime soon. So I think it's being you know, thoughtful around how do we bring these into the decision-making process and make sure that they yield success. The second bit I'd like to touch on is this idea of dynamic pricing. Next slide, please, Siviwe. So, and this again, I'm going to touch on it very high level, but the idea of dynamic pricing is that you have a mechanism, a tool, or a solution to be able to partially or fully adjust your prices at various intervals at any given time. And this usually is adopted by companies like Uber, so the travel companies, your lodging, some of your e-commerce companies actually also use dynamic pricing. And the idea there is that your final price that you show to a consumer is based on the demand, the supply, what's happening in the market at that particular point in time. So if I request an Uber at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to get a very different price to the price I'm going to get if I request one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, for example. So there are various sectors and I guess businesses that definitely benefit a lot from having something like this. For example, Fly Safari, if you book a flight ticket very close to the time, you'll probably get to pay a higher premium for that versus if you book it well in advance. So based on the type of company or the type of business that you have, dynamic pricing could play a particular role. There are obviously pros and cons of adjusting prices quite frequently. For example, if you have a bakery and I come buy bread in the morning at 8 o'clock and you say bread is 10 rands, and then later in the evening I want bread again and bread is now 15 rands, it can be a bit disruptive and confusing to a consumer. So I think it's just obviously it really has to be dependent on what type of business are you running, and is it make sense? Is that price certainty important in that particular sector that you are in? Next slide, Siwe. Thank you. So it's the slide with yes, that one. Perfect, thank you. So on this slide, and I think this will definitely take us to the rest of the presentation, which is not a whole lot. I really wanted to touch on some of the main factors to consider. This is not a comprehensive list at all. These are just factors that I thought are important. So one of the factors to consider, I would say, is business strategy. So in any case, whether you are increasing your prices or lowering your prices for whatever reason, this must reflect your overall business strategy. So if your target market is high-end customers, you need to understand how they react to a price increase or a price decrease, right? Usually with high-end customers, there's a perception that something, based on how much they can afford, they are not as sensitive to pricing, but also there's a perception that if something is more expensive, it probably has more value. So if you reduce your price for a high-end client, you're probably going to struggle a bit with the demand at some point. And then the opposite holds for your lower end middle segment, where there's more price sensitivity to an increase in pricing. So over time, you will then start to see quantity or demand going down. And again, with regards to business strategy, you need to obviously work out what are your profitability goals. At the end of the day, you do need to be a sustainable business. But as you decide on, what to do with your pricing, what is your overall pricing strategy? Are you a profit business? Is this sort of a time game where you only are going to be able to make your profit 3 or 5 years down the line, so you stick it out? The other important piece here is around elasticity of demand. And I've touched on it quite briefly to say, how sensitive are our customers with regards to a change in price? And there it really is about knowing who your customer base is, knowing who your client base is, and being able to find that sweet spot. And initially it could be that you have a range of prices and maybe you test to see, but knowing your customer is important, because you're going to have different approaches for different customer buckets. The other piece speaks to changes in cost, and these are broad costs, right? So costs affecting the company, purely the company, or costs affecting the economy in general, which, for example, speaks to petrol prices or general inflation. So sometimes what you could do there is consider having a gradual increase. If there's a general increase in prices in the economy, you have a gradual increase until you get to that price that will make sure that you still are able to make some of your profit back. But in that, it's also important to understand how your customers are relating to it. How much of the price increase do you actually pass on to your customer? How much of it do you absorb and try to work with internally so that maybe you can cut costs on your side? The other big factor is trends, so what's happening outside of your business? Where do you sit in the market? That is important. If one or more of your competitors significantly reduces their prices, what does that mean for you, for example? The reality of the matter is we live in a country where people are saving less and less, people are borrowing more, people are paying more for stuff that probably, the government would offer, right? So how do you introduce your product into a market like that where people will actually see value in it and not necessarily only look at it from a price perspective and feel like, oh, we don't need this. It's another cost that I can't afford. Then the last bubble that I've got there speaks to product maturity. And I'm going to use the next few slides just to speak to this product maturity aspect, but I've got a few examples that will hopefully drive the point home. Next slide, please, Siviwe. Cool. So the first example I've got there, I've got an example of Netflix and DSTV. And this speaks to when your product is very nascent or very new in the market and you're looking to drive penetration. A lot of other players and startups or small businesses have adopted this similar strategy in that they go into the market providing or asking a very low price. And then over the term, as that product matures and they have more of the market or their market share grows, then they start increasing their price. So you'll see, for example, with Netflix, that basic plan, the subscription charge there was about $7.99. But that was in 2014. And then in 2019, it was $8.99. Actually, recently, this price is now $9.99. So they've moved their price drastically from where they started in the market. And obviously, they do have different buckets for their different customers. But throughout the different subscription plans, their pricing has been increasing. Same as DSTV. You look at the DSTV family plan. In 2013, that was about 160. You look at now in 2022, it's just above 300 rands. So the idea there is that, yes, you might enter the market at a very low price because you want to entice more customers and get a higher market share. But then the issue comes in when the rules of engagement now change, and which is what Netflix is struggling with. When now you want to start making back the profit and you start increasing your prices, that can be a bit tricky. You might have obviously built up a very loyal customer base. You might have built up a very frequent customer base, which is what these guys would have done. But when you start changing the rules of engagement and start charging higher prices, or basically what Netflix did was they said, for every Netflix account, you can only use it on one device, whereas previously people used to share their logins. So for example, I could have a Netflix account. I share my login with my sister at university. She can also log into Netflix. So now they wanted to introduce this aspect of restricting that. So again, changing the rules of engagement. And the interesting thing in why this Netflix thing is quite big is from that time when Netflix came into the market at low prices up until now, where they are changing the rules of engagement, there's been a lot of other competitors come in. So now they can't be ignorant and just do whatever they feel they need to do. They need to look at the fact that their customers have options. There's Apple TV, there's Amazon Prime, there's Hulu, same as DSTV from a South African context. DSTV can't just do whatever with prices. Netflix is their competitor in the South African context. Even Amazon Prime and Apple TV, Hulu, etc. So that's just an example that I thought could be quite interesting to consider. Next slide, please, Siviwe. The next slide, again, speaking to factors to consider and looking at another example. So this one speaks again to the idea that your product is probably still new in the market. You are looking to build up market share, but your focus here is more around making most of your revenue at the beginning. So it's sort of like an inverse to the one that I just spoke about. And with this one, you see it a lot with your high-tech products. So similar to your iPhones. Samsung has a similar graph I looked at recently, where they come into the market, they pitch the product at a very high or at a relatively high price. And then over time, over a few months or maybe 2 years or so, the price starts dropping down. One of the reasons for that is they release revised or other versions of the product over time. So what happens is obviously they introduce a new product into the market. They probably improve the camera or something, and the customers would naturally want this newer version. So that would drive the price down or reduce the demand for the old version. So this is something to consider as well in your pricing, in that where do you pitch, or where do you start? Also, the idea here, if you were to use this type of approach, is you are believing that there will be someone that is willing to buy an iPhone at $700 at the beginning. And if the market is there, then yes, it probably works for you. It probably also works if your customer base is more on the high end, and they really don't mind paying that premium. Next slide, please, Sylvie. Thank you. So this slide is quite interesting, and I think this is something that we don't pay as much attention to, but it works, definitely. So this speaks to psychology pricing and the idea that we as human beings tend to yield to emotion rather than logic. So that first picture there where you've got the TV screen and the pricing that says 3,999 is the idea that we as humans tend to read pricing from left to right. So we would register the 3 and we would see the 999 as it's not yet 4,000 rands. So in your mind, you already subconsciously feel like, okay, it's not yet 4,000 rands, but it actually is 4,000 rands, right? And this is marketing that we see every day, right? Where the pricing, for example, is like this, and you automatically feel like it's not that expensive, but it actually is, but it does work. So that's just something to note in how you price, and that there are things that have worked for the longest of time. So you don't have to reinvent a whole lot of stuff. Just, be a business owner that also understands the psychology of things and how that works. The other piece that I wanted to talk about is this idea of product bundling that we see quite a lot. For example, petrol stations use this, where you're there to pour your petrol, probably not recently, because maybe not often nowadays because of where the prices are, but you'd usually be handed with a pamphlet that has, you buy a pie and a drink for 20 rands. That is something that they would have built into the pricing, but that's part of marketing. So instead of you pouring petrol, you could actually now decide to step out of the car and actually go decide to buy the special, because one, they've printed a pamphlet, you feel like you're getting you're getting 2 for 1, but they've worked out the pricing in the back end, so it works out for them anyway. The other biggest culprits who are very successful at this is Clicks. And I'm using a big corporate, but I think, some of these or variations of these could be adopted into small businesses as well. It really is in the fact that almost 60% of Clicks' annual revenue comes from this 3 for 2 campaign. So what they do is Click says, choose whatever range of product, whether it's Colgate or Sunlight, and if you choose 3 products, we will give you the cheapest one for free. And this works, right? So instead of now going to buy toothpaste, I'm now buying 2 toothpastes and a mouthwash, because Clicks made me believe that, and not made me believe, but they actually that's what they're offering me. It's an effective strategy. I'm now buying a product that I would not have bought, that I was not planning to buy. So this is very strong marketing, but behind it sits the pricing, because Clicks is able to make up whatever free product that they give you, they're able to make that back. You would not have bought this other product, but you did it. Or maybe now, instead of not buying, getting another cheaper third product, you are actually probably getting a more expensive third product. So you end up actually spending a bit more, which works for them. Last slide, please, Siviwe. So I think that's my time. I probably went a little bit over, but I think what I'd like to touch on here, which is important and which I think Nishi also was alluding to, is this idea of you need to go back to the main thing, right? The main thing is the main thing. You need to find a way of being able to navigate back to the client wherever you are. So whether you're looking at pricing or marketing, you need to be able to navigate and say, how does this what does this mean for the client? How does this apply to my target audience? The other thing I want to bring back up and reinforce is the importance of leveraging technology and data to the best of your ability in informing your decision making. Another piece is when you are adjusting prices for whatever reason, it's important to be able to monitor the impact. If you introduce a special or a promotion, it is very important to go back and say, what was the impact of that? How many extra customers did I get? How many more did I sell by having this particular promotion or campaign or using this particular technology or medium if you use social media? The other thing that I want to bring up again, the customer has options. Always remember that the customer always has options. It's not just you. You're not an island. There's other people that the customer could easily go back to. I also wanted to bring up the fact that it doesn't matter how good your marketing or your underlying pricing is. Keep the customer at the back of your mind. What sets you apart from your competitors? So that customer experience, from the moment they ask you for pricing up until they use your product, how do they engage with your brand? How do you get your customers to be your fans or to be your ambassadors for your product? So these are some things that I think is important, but always be able to navigate back to the customer and have customer as top of mind. That's it from me today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sipiwe.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was a very insightful presentation. And I'm just looking at all the comments in the comment section there. And I've also noted all the questions that were coming in as Kathy was giving her presentation. We are noting those colleagues and we will be addressing them in the Q&A. But thank you very much for that, Kathy. I mean, you touched on some very critical things there. And psychological pricing is an interesting one. I saw a meme just the other day with a man selling watermelons. So he has two signs up. One says 1 watermelon is 3 Rand, and the other sign says you can get 3 for 10 Rand. Okay, so this young man is observing this, and people are going to the vendor buying 3 watermelons at a time. So this one man decides to take up the opportunity himself. He approaches the vendor and he buys 3 watermelons, but each at 3 Rand, right? And he says to the old man, do you notice that I've just brought 3 watermelons for 9 Rand, and you have a sign that says you can get 3 for 10 Rand? And the old man gives him his watermelons, and he just chuckles and lets the young man go away. And he then, there's a speech bubble in which the vendor is thinking to himself, you have just bought 3 watermelons, whereas you could have bought 1, but because you wanted to sort of take advantage, in inverted commas, of the 3 for 10 Rand special, you bought 3 at 9 Rand, whereas you could have probably just bought the 1. So yeah, pricing, psychological pricing is a very big one, and it's widely used across the market, and many of us fall victim to it a lot of the time. I remember a friend of mine called me the other day. He was driving somewhere long distance, and he saw a promo for a burger by one of the big chain restaurants in the country, a few kilometers away from a big refueling station. And he says, without even thinking about it, he parked and went into the restaurant and bought that exact, meal they had advertised in the highway. And he called me furious, saying, man, it's like something had overcome me. I didn't even think about it, I only thought about it when I had the meal in my hand going back into my car. So yeah, a lot of us will fall victim to it a lot of the time, and it is a very useful tool to have in your arsenal as a business person. So that's something to certainly think about, how you integrate that into your own marketing strategies and how you use your pricing as a marketing strategy. I'm noting the comments come in, and colleagues will address those. And if you have to drop off the call, we'd love you to stay, but we'll be circulating the recording. Kati, before we move over to Dr. Thommie, have you any closing remarks?
Thank you, Siviwe. I think closing remarks for me would be, you know, keep the main thing, right? What you're good at. As you grow your business, as you adopt various strategies, keep the main thing. What introduced you to customers at the beginning, don't discard that. That might be the one thing that differentiates you. And also, we will never get away from this social media technology use of platform data. So as you are building out your business today, even if you have, however small you are, it's important to start thinking about how best to use the info, because this is free information that clients are giving to you by them engaging with you, liking your profile, sharing your profile. You are getting free information that will help you in deciding the next steps or the next or how to grow your business. So that would be the closing remarks for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Kati. And I think you also spoke a bit about customer segments. You made mention of, you know, higher end customers versus the middle to lower end type customers. And that's a very important consideration to make when, you know, planning a price and working on a pricing strategy. I mean, you can have two, say, let's take ShopRite and Woolworths as specific examples. Both of them are supermarkets. And by and large, they sell the same products, but their value propositions are very different, which then spills over to the pricing of their products. You know, ShopRite is almost, you know, mass market. You come in, and I mean, they've done a lot of work in the background to reduce their pricing. They own their own trucks, you know, which then deliver the products all over the country and so on and so forth, which they've worked into their pricing versus at Woolworths, where in addition to the product, they're almost selling an experience, you know. So when you purchase groceries at Woolworths, you're almost going to get a different experience to what you would at your local ShopRite supermarket. And that's because the value propositions are different. They sell more or less the same products, but the value propositions, the fundamental principles underlying the businesses are different. So that's an important consideration to make as well, because that will inform your pricing, because it also speaks to your target market. If you pitch your pricing at this level, does it really appeal to your target market? How is it perceived by a target market? Is it something that's aspirational? It's something that's going to put them off, you know, for reasons that Kati mentioned a little earlier. But we are left with 2 minutes to go before 10 o'clock. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Thommie to give us his close kind of colleagues, I'm going to ask that you please mute your microphones once again if you aren't addressing the forum. And if you could also unmute, sorry, not unmute, but disable your webcams. I've seen a few people share their webcams, so if you don't mind, colleagues, just for bandwidth.
Hi, Siviwe. Everybody can hear me, I presume.
Oh yes, yes, we can hear you, Dr. Thommie. Take it away.
All right, perfect. Thanks to my colleagues for the, I think, amazing insights that they've given. Just a quick, before I go through to the presentation, just a quick overview of myself and JTB. So, strange enough, or interesting enough, all the clients that we deal with when we write business plans and strategic plans for our clients, and especially when we assist them with their financial projections and their budgets, pricing is one of the key aspects that we come across, and that normally is quite a challenging aspect to our clients. So, I mean, especially if you look at pricing, it's not just a fact of saying, you know, I've got a product and I'm going to bring it to market at a certain price. There's so many aspects that needs to be considered, and we'll quickly delve into that. But just briefly, I'm the founder of JTB Consulting. We've, for the last 16, 17 years, been assisting both local and African-based SMEs and larger organizations with business planning and the entire sphere of that service, what that would entail. So everything from assisting clients with pre-startup, market research and feasibility studies, right through to actually getting funding and implementing that business plans, and obviously the pricing strategy component once the funding has been received. So pricing definitely one of the key aspects that we do find. So I'm going to just for bandwidth switch off my camera and then share the presentation. All right. Siviwe, can you just let me know if everybody can see the presentation?
It's still blank on my end, Dr. Thommie, but it seems to be loading. I will let you know just as soon as, and it's come up.
Okay, so it's up.
That's going across to everyone. Yeah,
Perfect.
Please take it away.
All right. All right. So interestingly enough, when we speak to our clients, both startups or pre-startups as well as early startups that's been operating, let's say, for a few months up to 2 years. One of the colleagues mentioned earlier that revenue, Nishi mentioned that revenue is not the same as profit, and that is exactly what we find as well. People bring a product or a service to the market, and they feel, a funder asks me for an income statement, what my profitability is like, and at the end of the day, everybody focuses on profit and they forget about all the other components and factors that you need to take into account to get to the actual price that you want to bring to the market. So yes, profit is, and your profit margin, and we speak about various profit margins, which I will discuss a bit later. But profit margin and having a decent profit obviously is one of the aspects of pricing and your pricing model, but it's not the only one. And it will also change as the markets change, which we will discuss now. So profit is one of the things that you can look at the end of the day, but remember, as you start introducing to the market, there are so many conditions and market aspects that you need to consider. So the list is not exhaustive, but I'm just mentioning it briefly here. Let's look at, for argument's sake, your market. You can't just bring a product or a service to the market without taking into account what the market is like. And if I talk about market conditions, it can be anything like, are you entering a market where it's a growth market? Now, let's take an example in South Africa. The past 2 years, we've seen that COVID has had an extremely negative effect on, let's say, the travel industry. So if you started a company, a travel company, let's say 3 years ago in 2019, and you priced your product or your service at a specific rate, and suddenly you hit by COVID, where other people can't travel to your accommodation. Let's say your accommodation provider, they can't travel to you during lockdown 5 and 4. What are you going to do? Is your business going to survive? Are you going to be able to take on clients again when it opens up, as it did? Is your pricing going to be exactly the same, let's say, as in 2019 versus now? So for argument's sake, I mean, we look at a lot of travel companies now that contacts us, accommodation providers, hospitality sector, and they're not the same type of companies that they were in 2019. They had to change their entire approach, both their marketing approach, but also their pricing strategy, because people are still opening up to the whole idea of traveling again, whether it's domestic or international travel, and those are some of the factors that they need to consider. Also, there's obviously talk now on the market of America entering a recession, which will obviously have a negative impact on the rest of the developing nations. So are you going to keep your product or your service pricing exactly the same if we do enter a recession? Because what would happen with a recession? You're most probably going to find that people's disposable income are going to be less, because now suddenly you need to have fuel for your generator. You have to have fuel at almost 40 Rand a litre that they talk about. So what is going to happen with that few rands that you have left? Are you still going to buy the type of product that you want to bring to the market? Another component is obviously your actions of your competitors. Very important as well. I mean, there's no such thing as not having a competitor. We find there's a lot of companies that we deal with that reckons they're the only one that sells this service or the only one that sells this product, and it isn't like that. Unless you're not a Facebook, for argument's sake, that a decade ago entered the market as a first mover, Even Facebook had at that stage had a competitor in MySpace, which was a company that offered very similar social media platform that Facebook did. They was just not successful to sustain throughout the period. So same with Uber. Companies come to us and they say, listen, I want to be like an Uber, or I'm an Uber-like service. Now, even though that might be the case, you are still going to have either a direct competitor that's going to offer very similar service or product than you, or even an indirect competitor that might not offer exactly the same product or service, but they do have an impact, whether it's positive or negative, on your actual business. And then obviously the rest is pretty straightforward. I mean, profit margins, we look at all the various profit margins right through from your gross profit to the bottom line of your net profit. Your marketing costs. I mean, if your marketing cost is R1 million per year and your revenue is only 3 million, then you're sitting with a bit of a problem, because then marketing is quite a large expense, and how are you going to price your product accordingly? It was also mentioned earlier that you need to look at your pricing. If you run a campaign, or if you run a marketing campaign or so forth, are you going to be able to track the success of that campaign? If you put the pricing out there for R9.99 versus R10, will you be able to have measurable results to see exactly was it successful or wasn't it successful? Did I have a huge increase in customers, or was there really no difference in terms of what transpired? And then obviously one of the other components very important as well is your consumer or your customer. Do they still have the ability to pay for your product? Now, if it's a nice to have product, like let's say a Woolies meal, you're a professional, you don't have time to cook, you go quickly to Woolworths, you pop in, you buy for R70, you buy a nice microwave dinner. It was maybe much easier to do something like that before, when the petrol price was still R10. Are you still going to be able to do the same now, to sell that TV dinner at R70? Are the consumers still going to be able to pay for that type of product under the current conditions? So a study by McKinsey, one of the research firms, found that if you had to change your price, your sales price, by only 1%, and they did a survey across various sectors in various geographies and countries, they found that a change of 1% in your sales price can have up to 9% positive impact on your profitability. Whereas if you had to reduce your costs by only 1%, that impact is much, much smaller. So it's evident that when it comes to the sales price and your actual pricing that you bring to the market, it is extremely important what your sales price is versus the pricing of your actual fixed costs and variable costs that you try to monitor and control. Just some brief insights to give you an idea of what people do out there. The Professional Pricing Society did a survey as well, where they looked at how do people determine their various pricing. They found that 30% of everyone that they surveyed purely looked at their competitors. So they had one eye on their business and one eye on their competitor, and they said, okay, well, if my competitors ask R10 or $10, I'm going to ask $9. If my competitors increase by $12, then obviously there might be a good reason for that. I'm going to increase mine by $12 as well, which is obviously a very one-sided approach to determining your pricing strategy. A further 22% of those that were surveyed looked purely at their costs, and they add a margin of profit to get to the sales price. Once again, very one-sided, only looking at costs, not looking at the consumer, not looking at the value that you bring to the market, not looking at competitors, purely saying to yourself, it costs me R9 to make this product, or this service costs me R9 to bring to the clients. I'm going to ask R15 as a sales price. And a very small percentage, almost 20%, so 2 out of 10 companies looked at other factors as well, of which customers and what the customer's perception is of the product and willingness to purchase the product for, service for. Their focus was on that. So I'm not going to go into all the factors. My previous colleagues did touch on some of the factors, so there might be some areas where I'm just going to reiterate. But if you look at the factors to consider, one of the most important ones, especially when it comes to the services industry, are you going to be what they call a me too product? In other words, I've got 5 competitors that offers the same product. Mine is exactly the same, and we leave it up to the consumer to decide who they want to buy from. You know, maybe they like our logo or our brand. Our brand has got beautiful, you know, better colors than our competitor, and that's why they're going to buy from us. Or are you going to say, okay, I'm offering the same product or service, but I'm adding improvements, I'm adding value, and that can be anything from a quicker delivery or saving more time to your client for your clients, or you bring some more personalization to the floor. So it's very important to ask yourself that question. Also, for any pricing or any product and service that you want to price, there is a price ceiling. And you need to have a good understanding in terms of what that means. Where is that price ceiling? If your market dictates that your type of product is a quite generic product, and the market will only accept, let's say, 50 Rand for that product. Most of the competitors charge between 40 and 50. Then obviously, you know, there's a price ceiling. People won't really look at anything more expensive than 50. And once again, the price ceiling is determined by various components, whether there's any value created to the product and service that you offer. Once again, your competitors, also substitutes. I mean, you might have a similar product, but there might be substitutes that will deliver the same type of value or solves the same problem or need to the client. Market demand as well. I mean, we live in if you look at economics 101, the basics of economics, it's supply and demand. So if the demand is down, then obviously your pricing is going to be affected. Similar to supply. If the supply is down or up, it's going to affect your pricing similarly, and not just yours, obviously your competitors as well. So when it comes to your own business and your decision as to how you price, you need to keep 3 things in consideration. First of all, you and your management team or staff need to have well-defined standards in terms of, are you going to offer discounts? Are you going to charge at a premium? What are those levels? When do you implement it? Who takes accountability for making that decision? Your performance measures as well. So at the end of the day, if you have a budget and you need to attain a certain level of revenue and profitability, what are those performance measures? Is it the number of units that you want to sell? Is it the number of clients that you want to engage for a certain service that you offer? What is good or a decent profit in your industry? Can you compare it to competitors, etc.? And then also at the end of the day, we must remember that most companies have sales teams or business developers. And how would you going to reward them? So if they increase your sales due to a direct effort on their parts, opening up networks or signing new clients, are you going to reward them based on revenue that they sell, or are you going to reward them based on profit, or is it going to be a combination of the two? So those type of internal discussions and decisions need to be made before you even start looking at determining a price for your products or your services. So if you look at the theory behind it, there's roughly different schools of thought, but anything from 14 to about 18 different pricing models. Some companies might use very similar pricing models, and they might name it something different or call it something different. But as a rule, you're looking at between 14 and 18 different pricing models, of which I'm just going to quickly touch on 5 of them. My previous colleagues have spoken about some of them, but I'll just, where needed, just allude to certain facts there as well. So penetration pricing, we saw earlier. It's normally when a company really wants to bring to the market a product for quick absorption and a quick loyalty that you want to bring to the table. So as a rule, if you look at Samsung versus Apple, if you look at Netflix that we discussed earlier, Starbucks, for argument's sake, what they do on a seasonal basis, not so much in South Africa, but normally what they do on a seasonal basis, when it's Christmas time, they introduce certain drinks just for for a 6-week period or a month period that's tied to that specific season, maybe you know, a cinnamon drink or whatever the case may be. MWeb, same story. When they started, they penetrated the market with, instead of asking 1,000 Rand, they will ask 950 Rand. And there's obviously various pros and cons. And, you know, in the interest of time, when I'm not going to read through all of them, I will obviously ask Saviwe just to share the presentation with everyone so that you have this as a point of reference. But at the end of the day, you know, there's pros and cons to all of it. So if you look at the pros, if you're a fairly new company and you have some brand identity behind yourself, or brand awareness behind yourself, you know, if you bring a product to the market with a penetration strategy, you know, you can very quickly get adoption by customers. But at the end of the day, you must remember one thing, that you can create a pricing expectation. So now you said, okay, my pricing is 950, and Netflix was a perfect example earlier. You know, you started with $7.99, and suddenly 2 years later, I'm an avid watcher of Netflix, and now suddenly I need to pay $13.99 for argument's sake, as an example. Am I, as a consumer or customer, still going to be happy to be your customer? Or am I going to cancel and you know, sign up with Disney Channel or sign up with Amazon Prime, for argument's sake? Psychological, we spoke about it earlier as well. I think it was beautiful examples that were used. At the end of the day, if you ever in the marketing field and if you ever appoint a marketing person in your company and they did their BCom in marketing, for argument's sake, they would have had a subject called consumer psychology. And consumer psychology really focuses on what makes a consumer spend their money. Why would I take 100 Rand out of my wallet and spend it on your product as opposed to somebody else's product? Or I have a choice. Do I want to spend it on your product, or do I want to spend it on something totally different that's not even relevant to your product? So that's understanding that psyche, that whole psychological decision making of the consumer is extremely important when it comes to your pricing strategy. And the examples that were used earlier is great. For argument's sake, buy one get free is much more successful in the industry than 50% off 2 items. And if you look at it, it's exactly the same thing. But our minds are programmed in such a way that immediately if you see the word free, it tells you this is a deal and I can't miss this. Other examples is what they call artificial time constraints. So you walk past Clicks or Dis-Chem or Edgar's, and they say only 1 day sale. Come now, 50% off 1 day sale. So immediately your brain tells you, oh my goodness, it's Friday today. I'm only getting paid next week, so I need to go now. Otherwise, I'm not gonna get the same deal again a week later. The example of 10 Rand versus 9 Rand 99. We saw the example of the TV, 3,999. They call it charm pricing. And it's 10 Rand basically. I mean, we don't even get a cent back from the till anymore when we go and buy something at ShopRite. So your mind tells you it's 9 Rand, but it's actually 10 Rand. Some companies use what they call odd pricing. They would say, okay, well, instead of saying 10 Rand or 9.99, I'm going to say 9.93. And then brand specific pricing, Walmart in America as an example, they don't use the 9.99 or the 100.99, they use 9.88. The 0.88 is actually one of their specific pricing strategies that they do use and that they have come to be known for in the market. Economy pricing, straightforward. You don't have a lot of cost in terms of production and marketing and so forth, so you can really target the client that is price sensitive. Very important. It's a very good strategy to use if you are in an economic downturn or recession like we are currently, hopefully not going to end up in, but we are facing. And that's people that really look out for those deals. Very, very important though, at the end of the day, is also to remember that you can't start playing around with your prices. I mean, if you charge a certain price today, you can't go tomorrow and suddenly double your pricing. It might have a very negative impact on your brand or your perception of your brand as being, you know, all over the place when it comes to your pricing strategy. Good examples, for argument's sake, if you look at Mango Airlines or Ryanair abroad, or even Pick n Pay with their branded items, it's lower than, let's say, the other similar items, and it's specifically for a reason. It's been known as an economic product, and people are, when they go and, let's say, buy pilchards, or they buy baked beans, they would go and look for the, let's say, the Pick n Pay branded item, because they know it's cheaper, quality fairly similar. Premium pricing, if we can all be in this area of the industry, it would be great. But really, here you're talking about the premium client, the high-end consumer, the one that is willing to buy an Apple every time a new Apple iPhone is launched. The ones that's willing to buy a BMW, doesn't matter what's comparable in the market. Tesla is another example, not yet in South Africa, but abroad. Their value is the fact that it's an electric car. It's got a long electric battery life. It is priced much higher than your similar engine cars, but people buy it, and they get a value, and the value to them is they get an electric vehicle. They're moving away from diesel and petrol, and the value is captured in that premium that is charged by Tesla. Another example in the technology sector is Bose speakers, for argument's sake, as opposed to the normal speakers you get. A lot of people will go and buy Bose speakers or Harman Kardon or Onkyo, any of those Swedish brands. And it's a very selected niche market, but high profitability, profit margins, much lower sales volume. But also remember, because of the higher profit margins and the higher revenue level or sales price tag, you can also spend much more on marketing to really get focused on that niche market that you want to target. Price scheming, I won't go into that again. I think the example that we used earlier was brilliant. But yeah, I mean, it's another one of the very important pricing strategies that are being used, both in the local and the international market. And then the last one that I want to touch base on, and this is specifically on the software side of things and the technology sector, is your freemium models. Some of the examples I've added here is, for argument's sake, if you look at Dropbox, they've got the functionality of saving your files online in the cloud, and it's free forever up until a certain level of capacity. As soon as you start needing more capacity for those files, then you start paying. So they have, if you look at their business model, for argument's sake, they have millions of clients that continue using the free version, but also they've got millions of clients that went from a free version into paying customers on a month-to-month basis. So there is that sweet spot if you operate in this type of strategy, where there's a sweet spot where you need to ask yourself, what is that level number of paying customers that I need to break even? And obviously over and above that, what do I need to really make a profit on a month-to-month basis? Some other examples as well. Most websites are designed on WordPress. Now, WordPress as a technology is free to use to design your website, and they make their money by a lot of third-party software designers that have add-ons that you can add to your website. And that is where they start making their money, is by selling these add-ons to the market and to you as a consumer. And that is it from my side. I trust it gave some further insights to everyone, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I'm certain it did give further insights, Dr. Thommie. Thank you very much for that. I am a bit worried about the time. I see we have 6 minutes left to go before 10:30, and we scheduled the session to end at 10:30. So I'm going to ask anyone who can stay for an additional 5 to 10 minutes to do so, for us to have the question and answer sessions. And if the panelists need to jump off at exactly 10 o'clock, please feel free to do so as well. What I will do, I will note any questions that were directed to our individual panelists to them by email, and I will coordinate a response with the person who raised the question. So yeah, if you can stay for an additional 5 to 10 after 1/2 past, by all means, please do. If you have to jump off, will completely understand. Send through your questions, and I will coordinate connecting you with with any one of the panelists accordingly. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Thommie. Very insightful indeed. And I think it's absolutely astonishing that only 18% of the companies surveyed in the McKinsey study looked at customers. I find that mind-boggling, actually. Understanding your customers is the nearest thing you can do to reading, people's mind. Imagine, I think the best case scenario for any entrepreneur would be the ability to read their customers' minds, because then they would know exactly how to react to their customers' thinking and have the products placed right there when the customers will need them most. There's this whole concept of personas. In fact, let me tell you a very quick story where I had to use the development of a persona to solve a problem, and this has great applicability in business thinking. So I moved to a new place recently, and I found that the place had mice, and I needed to get rid of these mice. And what I did is I applied the concept of customer development, and that entails one, effectively climbing into the shoes of their customers and trying to perceive the world from their perspective, trying to understand things from their standpoint, because then you can tailor make your solutions to your customer segments. So in any case, I read up a bit on mice, and I learned that they actually prefer peanut butter to cheese. I then went out and bought a ultraviolet light because I learned that they actually urinate along the way to sort of keep track of their points of entry, points of exit, and where they are likely to find food. Long story short, I was able to climb into the mind of a mouse, as funny as that might sound, and I was able to get rid of them. I then bought these mouse traps that don't kill them, and then I went and got rid of them in a bushy area to hopefully have them live a white life. I hope they didn't get caught by cats or anything of the like. But I find it absolutely astonishing that only 18% of the respondents actually considered their customers when factoring the prices. Because if you miss that, I think you've lost half the battle. It's absolutely empirical that you understand your customers, because if you understand your customers, you'll understand what they are likely to respond to. And if you are taking shots in the dark, it's like good luck to you. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Thommie. Very insightful. And without wasting any more time, colleagues, I'm gonna go to the questions that were posed in the chat. And if you have any additional questions, please continue to post them on the chat. And we'll use what time we have to assign the questions to our panelists. So to avoid the panelists responding at the same time, and thank you for the suggestion, Nishi, I will assign each of the questions that came up in the chat to one panelist at a time. So the first question came from Spusi, who said, I would like to know what are the interventions one can introduce if the business is not making a profit, but the concept is good. Nishi, would you like to take that one? Is Nishi still on the call with us?
Sorry about that, Sifiwe. I just switched screens momentarily. Yeah, so I'm just playing catch up. I do apologize.
No, not a problem. So Spusi would like to know what interventions he can introduce if the business is not making a profit yet, but he believes that his concept is good.
I did very briefly reply to that, and I would be careful not to write it down to price only. There, I think we would have to do a deep dive analysis into what essentially is causing that scenario to prevail. And there could be so many. Is it customer service? Is it returns on the products? Is it they're unhappy with the service? Is it an overrun of a project in terms of, from inception to delivery, and then ultimately also factor in the whole pricing. If once we identify what the issues are with that, then we look at how can pricing be adjusted to cater for that, because whether you make a huge or a small profit, your ultimate goal in business should always be to make a profit.
Thank you very much for that, Nishi. And another thing to consider, Spusi, so you know, you can believe that your concept is good, but a good way to get an accurate indication is to get feedback from the market. I remember I once worked with a bunch of guys, you know, developers, and they only tasted their product with other developers, you know, and they came out with this product, which was very unuser friendly and very complicated for the layman, you know, who isn't looking at it, you know, from a development standpoint. So they'd done something immaculate. Everyone in the circle and the echo chamber was, you know, amazed at this wonderful product. But it just wasn't a good fit for the market. It was a bit too technical. It was a bit too complex. It wasn't at all user friendly. So whereas it is a good product, it wasn't necessarily a good fit for the target market. So maybe that's something to consider. A product can be good, but is anyone willing to pay for it? One could say soundproof windows would be, you know, a good thing to sell to farmers. But farmers might very much enjoy having not soundproof windows, so that when the chickens, you know, start making a noise at around 5:30 in winter, they know it's time to get up. And so it's not a solution they are looking to get rid of, you know. So those are some of the considerations you might want to make there. We had another one from Spusiso, and this I will address to Kati. Spusiso says, how can he introduce a new service to his market? He recently launched an online flight booking service, but he hasn't made much revenue from it. The booking service is exactly similar to online flight booking services. So it's similar to other services on the market, but Spusiso isn't getting as much traction as he would like to. Kati, how would you respond to that?
Siviwe, I think the answer for this is similar to Nishi's answer on the previous question. I don't think we can do a full diagnosis now and actually get to the answer. There's many reasons why a particular service or product you introduce into the market might not be working. You know, it's important to go back to the basics of what feeds the outcome, or what is the outcome a function of, right? So there's your actual product, there's your audience. So having the right product, the right audience at the right time, the right price, those things need to feed, you know, they inform the overall success or outcome of what you put out there. And there's other enablers, like how you market your product. You know, what are the digital channels that you are using for your clients to access and engage with you? So there's quite a bit that obviously could be unpacked and looked at based on that. There's a couple of factors, definitely. So I don't think it would just be one thing. And I also don't think it's something we can do in 5 minutes. But I'm happy to, if this is allowed or possible, to probably get better context so that we can assess fully.
Sure, I'd be happy to coordinate that. And Spusi, so you and I have a meeting on tomorrow. Actually, we will speak at length about this together with your assigned mentor. But thank you very much for that, Kati. And I noticed a few people were asking if the session is recorded and if the presentation slides could be circulated after this. I'm going to get consent from the panelists. I would assume they wouldn't have a problem with us sharing the slides with everyone present today. This one is for Dr. Thommie from Aubrey, who asks, how does one write a business plan with dynamic price factored? Black Umbrellas requires fixed values of possible revenue that can be generated, and thus how can the balance be made to pursue both investor client regarding the figures? I'm not sure I read that properly, but I think you got the gist of it, Dr. Thommie, and I saw you did respond to this briefly in the chats.
All right, that's a very good question, and I mean, dynamic pricing is one of the most difficult pricing strategies to try and put down on paper when it comes to a straightforward 5-year projection. So if I look at what funders normally would require, you know, whatever the assumptions are that is made on your pricing or your revenue at the end of the day, you need to be able to justify that. So if you enter an industry where it's dynamic pricing, let's say like booking.com, or like we saw the airline operator like FlySafeAir, it's going to be virtually impossible unless you're an advanced expert user of Excel to design a financial model or projections in your income statement that is going to be able to address each and every scenario for 365 days, 24 hours a day in terms of customer demand. It's a different story if you're already operating. If you've been operating for 4 or 5 years, for argument's sake, you would be able to draw some conclusion in terms of what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years in terms of your price, your customer behavior, and then that can inform your pricing strategy. But as a rule, how we deal with this when we present it to our investors, and they're quite happy with that, is you are quite exhaustive in your details in terms of how your pricing will be determined when it comes down to actual practice and actual operations, and then tie that to a certain amount of customers that you think you will be able to target and that will buy from you. So it's a bottom-up approach that gets to the final figure to say, okay, well, based on what we've made now, on the assumptions we've made now, our revenue, let's say, will be R1 million for the next year. But to really, like I said earlier, to really get to a stage where you try and to consider each and every customer's behavior at every single time, it's going to be virtually impossible. If you look at the pitch that was done by Uber and by Booking.com when they initially started, their financial projections didn't actually have a detailed dynamic pricing done in Excel or in their financial statements. They had a good summary in terms of what the issue is or the problem of the client, how they're going to address it, the technology that they're going to use to address it, and that technology itself was the narrative that they used to convey the message that the technology will pick up on the behavior of the customer to determine the pricing itself. So it wasn't so much of the actual top line revenue projections, it was more in terms of the actual technology being used to determine that the dynamic pricing on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Thommie. Colleagues, we still have quite a number of questions coming in on the chat, but looking at the time, I don't think we're going to be able to tackle all of them. So what I will do is I will categorize the questions, and then I will have our business coaching unit internally give some insights into the various questions, and we will share it with the cohort that is present today. And for anything specific beyond that, then we will rope in our panelists to perhaps give further insights. But just on account of time alone, I think we're going to stop it there with the Q&A, and I will take it to email. First categorizing the questions, and then having insights from our internal business coaching, and roping in our panelists should it be required. But I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join the session, and thank you for the additional minutes you've given us to wrap things up. I found this to be very fruitful. Thanks for the engaging questions and interaction throughout, and a special word of thanks to our panelists. I'm thankful for the time you took to prepare your presentations and for the knowledge you shared with us today. I am certain that all of us are going to walk away having retrieved something. I certainly will be taking away various things that I'll be applying to both my personal capacity, or both to me in a personal capacity, and to me as an entrepreneur as well. Thank you very much. So after this, colleagues, certainly before the end of the day, I will circulate a survey to get feedback from the participants, just in terms of how the session proceeded, how it can be improved, and for suggestions for what topics we can tackle in the next questions. Those of you inquiring about the panelists and whether or not you can contact them, I will take that offline. There is a mentorship program in which you could potentially be linked to one of the panelists in a one-to-one relationship. but that will require insights from your business coach. And there is a system in place for how we work around that one. But on that note, I'd hate to take any more of your time up. Thank you very much, everyone. And I think we can bring the session to a close. Have a fantastic day further. And please expect to hear from me before close of business. Thank you and goodbye, everybody. I have noted Amelia's and Eric's hands. Colleagues, if you could kindly send your questions, and Mel's hand, if you could kindly send your questions in the chat, I will make sure to add them to the schedule I'm going to create and circulate with our coaching unit. But yes, I think we can all drop off after, of course, having sent our questions. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Very insightful indeed, Lucia. Thank you, everybody.